Hello friends, in this video, I'll tell you stories from Reddit that will give you goosebumps. In the noisy crowd of a fair, your mom suddenly grabs your hand. I was 13 or 14, and my family went to the county fair. It was an insanely crowded day, the kind where you have to make sure you keep up with all of your family. We were in the section with the kiddie roller coasters, and my aunt and dad were fighting over something ridiculous, so all of us were pretty distracted trying to get them to calm down. Out of nowhere, my mom shouts to me, "Follow me, now." She yanks me by the hand and pulls me along intently, without saying anything else. She runs over directly to a man who must have been in his 60s. He's holding the hand of a crying boy, maybe 5 or so. My mother aggressively asks the man, "What are you doing with him?" And the man freezes. He says that they just lost the boy's mother. He tells us that he is the boy's grandpa and that they are fine. Immediately, my mom kneels down and asks the boy, "Do you know this man?" The crying boy shakes his head no and says they are looking for his mommy. My mother asks the boy where he last saw her, and the boy points to the man. He says that she's in the parking lot. I immediately go cold, because I realize what's happening here. I look at the man and he's staring at the little boy. And he swipes his tongue across his top lip in a fraction of a second. My mom reaches for the boy's hand, holds my own hand tighter, and says my name and "I will help you find your mommy, okay?" She isn't in the parking lot. We're going to go back to the last spot you saw your mommy, and we'll get a police officer to help us find her. Is that okay? The boy looks to the older man and is visibly confused. But she's in the parking lot. We have to get her. My mother snaps at the old man to let go of the boy. He's glaring at her at this point. The man lets go and my mother picks the boy up. She promises him that we will help him find his mommy, asks him where he last saw her, and the boy points to the entrance of one of the rides. We both look in that direction and by the time we turn back, the man is gone. We end up finding a security officer who shouts into her walkie-talkie, "We found him." Next thing you know, a woman with 2 young twins in her arms is running to us in a panic. It was something straight out of a movie. She fell to the floor to hug her son and kept thanking my mother repeatedly in a crying fit. When she was able to talk, she told us that she had let her son go on a ride and promised him that she would wait for him at the exit. But then one of her children started crying. She was a single mother. It was only a few short moments of distraction that led her to turn back and find him completely missing. The officer thanked my mother, who was also crying at this point, and we went back to my family, who was worried about us having been gone for so long. My mom explained everything. Amidst my dad and fighting and all of the noise of the enormous crowd, she heard a distant, "I want my mommy." Somehow, out of the hundreds of people in that crowd, she was able to spot the kid and said that something instantly felt wrong. It was such a fast thing that she could have missed. She could have even overheard it and not been able to spot where it was coming from. We all went home after that. We've never returned to the fair in the 12 years since. The way he licked his lip, like the boy was some kind of dessert, still haunts me. The fact that he got away still haunts my mother. What if you were the last hope on a doomed flight? Helios Airways Flight 522. It was a flight from Larnaca, Cyprus, to Prague, Czech Republic, on the 14th of August 2005. The plane took off normally and climbed to altitude. But shortly afterwards, the pilots radioed in asking for help solving a technical problem, as an alarm was going off in the cockpit. After a few messages with the ground in which they seemed dazed and confused, they went silent. The plane continued on and eventually began circling on autopilot. As they could not raise the aircraft on the radio, a pair of fighters were scrambled to intercept and investigate. They found that the plane was circling with no signs of life in the cabin, and the pilots were slumped at the controls. Eventually, as they watched, a lone flight attendant entered the cockpit and sat at the controls. They were unable to speak to him on the radio, and he seemed unable to communicate. Shortly afterwards, the engines ran out of fuel, and the plane spiraled to the ground, crashing on a hillside in Greece. There were 121 people on board. What had happened was that the pressurization system had been turned off by maintenance to investigate a door problem, and the pilots failed to turn it back on when they ran through 3 separate checklists. When they radioed for help, they were already suffering from oxygen deprivation, and in their confusion they were unable to understand the advice to check the pressure switch. They passed out soon afterwards, and the plane continued on autopilot. The scary part is the lone flight attendant. He was Andreas Prodromou, a former Special Forces soldier and a trained pilot, but one who did not know how to fly a 737. Also on board was his girlfriend, who was also a flight attendant for Helios. He managed to remain conscious by using a portable oxygen bottle, and there is evidence that he brought the oxygen bottle to the cockpit and strapped it to the pilots in an attempt to resuscitate them, to no avail. By the time he realized that something was terribly wrong and was able to make it into the cockpit, you were likely never going to wake up. It was him who tried to take control of the plane just before it ran out of fuel. The cockpit voice recorder also captured him making 5 separate mayday calls, and to no effect, as he was tuned to the wrong frequency and out of range of the receiver. To be the only one conscious on a plane with 120 silent people, including the woman you love, knowing that they might still be alive and that you're their only hope, is utterly horrifying. Head swimming from lack of oxygen and barely able to function as you struggle with the equivalent of being above the peak of Mount Everest, especially when the engines flamed out and it became apparent that there was no hope. The last known action of Prodromou was to turn the plane away from Athens and towards an uninhabited area. You never know who's hiding in plain sight. This will probably be buried, but it's also a personal story of mine, and it's 100% true. It was my junior year of high school in SATX. I went to an unremarkable but decent high school, and at the time I lived in what was known as the medical center in the city, as it was a large concentration of hospitals, various specialty clinics, health schools, etc. In any case, at the beginning to the middle of my junior year, there was a large scare going around at the time of a string of sexual assaults and robberies taking place in the area, and every victim described it as being done by one suspect, who eventually became known as the medical center rapist. Nobody was able to track him down for a while, and this scare went on for about the whole of junior year into the summer heading towards senior year, and then it just stopped at about the beginning of my senior year. The reason I bring up my junior year is because I had a class, second period Spanish 1 class to be exact. Nothing too crazy in that class, a typical mishmash of students and a really nice teacher, and everyone fairly recognizes each other. More on this later. So after I graduated and moved away, it was 1 year after I had moved, I get a text from my mother with a link to a local news article with her saying, "Do you know this kid?" So after I graduated and moved away, it was 1 year after I had moved, I get a text from my mother with a link to a local news article with her saying, "Do you know this kid? He seemed like a normal kid, he had a girlfriend, was part of the basketball team, had friends, and didn't really raise any red flags." To think that it could have been my friends, sisters, or my mother who were attacked, and that it would have been a kid in my class without me knowing, and the realization of seeing him every day and the possibility of him committing a sexual assault just the night before. I messaged various friends and even some of my former Spanish to classmates, and they were as shocked as I was. We couldn't believe it. Do you want to hear the real kicker? He was arrested 2 days after he graduated. He was a year below me, and like I said, it was almost exactly 1 year after I graduated that they caught him. His trial lasted about 2 years, and in the meantime all of his friends ran online protests like "Release Ah. We know he's innocent and justice for wrongly convicted Ah." Little did they know, they had substantial evidence against DNA evidence from the rapes, fingerprints, the various victims, and witnesses confirmed that it was indeed their attacker. After 2 years of trials and testimonies, he received 99 years of prison. I don't know the full details of his sentence, but it doesn't look like he's ever getting out, as he shouldn't. If you really want to know the full details, feel free to look up the articles yourselves. Easy search. An 18-year-old ex-rapist classmate ruined his life just as he was about to live it. He even had a committed GF at the time of all this. I even had her for a class in senior year and had plenty of friends and a loving family. He had a good life. I can't imagine how his GF and family felt. I'm glad he's in prison and will likely never get out. It still shocks me to this day that there really are monsters all around us that we can't exactly see, and they're really good at hiding their evil and blending in.